we have our speaker. I'm going to try to pronounce your name now and just see if I can get it by the end. Ivan is I believe is your first name, and then the last name Mawarire or something like that.
Oh, you got it. You got it. I usually get free lunches of people who get it wrong, so I missed a free lunch.
Yeah, why don't you say it once so that we all get it correctly?
It's Ivan Mawarire.
Mawarire.
Okay.
There you go. Correct.
We'll probably stick to your first name because it's.
That's it. That's it. I know you'll have a problem rolling the R's there.
Yeah, that's a tough one. So anyway, welcome, and we're here at Coffee with a Purpose. I think we got most of our people here, and we usually start by some introductions. We'll try to be brief, because we want to hear what's going on with your activities. So we're going to go according to my screen, and Elaine is always the first one who joins us. She's always here like 8:45 before I even sign on. So you get to introduce yourself first.
So I'm relatively new to Natick. I'm Josh's mother, also Rebecca and Sam, and been active in disability rights for a very long time. Okay.
Okay, good. Carrie, I got you next.
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of, I'm a town meeting member, concerned environmentalist, and here on the 78th anniversary of D-Day, thinking much about this country and, how we preserve being overrun by the Nazi Germany, and how it's fitting that we have Yvonne talking today about what he's experienced in Zimbabwe. He and I have had a chance to talk a couple of times. A very rich conversation over some cheap wine one time, and took it from there. But he's a very, very interesting person and a great guy to get. Looking forward to hearing your story more.
Yep, and Pat, you're next.
Pat Conaway, just kind of the trash and trails guy of Natick, I guess. And it's sort of I've been a long time environmentalist, I guess, activist, and former teacher, public school teacher. But I just want to say delighted to be here. And I think Coffee with a Purpose was sort of started by years ago by my sister Sally and myself. And it used to be in person down Common Street, and now we've gone to the virtual. But it seems to be working out really well with this new team that Martin and Doug and people who are keeping the dream alive here at the Coffee with a Purpose.
Yeah, I hope we can go for many years. And Tom, you're next.
Yeah, I'm Tom. I've been a Natick resident for about 30 years, and I'm a racial activist, climate activist, member of Spark Kindness, and anxious to hear what you get to say today. Welcome.
All right, and Bill?
Hi, Bill Ramage. I am a Pat Conaway follower, picking up trash. Also a town meeting member, environmentalist, concerned about the environment, and climate change, concerned about our government and losing our democracy. Very concerned about that, as is Erica, and also about women's rights and the Roe v. Wade concern there. So, and also interested, obviously, in what you have to say. So, and I have a hard stop a little after 10, so I'm not. Don't want to disrespect you, but I do have another appointment. So hope to hear what you have to say.
Great. Brian.
Hi, I'm Brian McPherson. I'm an environmental activist and trained by Pat and the group. And thanks for coming and sharing. I'm going to have to leave early. I've got a dentist appointment, but I'm looking forward to hear what you have to say. Thank you.
And Sally? Sally, can I?
Hello, yeah, hi, Yvonne. I'm part of this group, and actually I want to thank Leslie Giffens, who is not with us this morning, but she helped facilitate Pat and me getting Coffee with a Purpose started in person when we used to meet and have Jane's wonderful pumpkin bread.
Yes.
But we're a group of great listeners, and Yvonne, you have so much to share with us. So I'm looking forward to that.
Great, thanks. And Carol?
Yes, hi, I'm Carol, and Yvonne knows me very well. So,
Yeah,
yes,
I think I
I'm
can't
having,
remember. I can't really remember where I've met you before, but yeah, it rings a bell.
Mhm.
yeah, so he's still alive and he doesn't seem to be suffering. So I'm enjoying so much hosting him at my home right now. I hope he stays as long as he wants. Okay.
Mhm.
Ricky?
Well, I don't know where to start. I guess I tell you, I'm a Holocaust survivor. I am a citizen activist, I would say, the first woman selectman in this town. And that was 60 some odd years ago. And I love this community. I'm active in just about every area that you can think of. I'm concerned with women's rights, certainly with voting rights for everyone. And that, I think, is the most crucial thing as I watch the world stage replaying the 1930s. And it's a very frightening scenario. And I don't want to take any more time. I'd like to hear what you have to say. We're honored to have you.
Ricky, we can't see your pretty face.
Right,
I'm
Ricky,
sorry.
move your screen, Ricky, so we can see your face.
If you can tilt your camera up somehow, but if not, yeah, I think you got, there you go.
There you
Oh,
go.
there's a nice face. Beautiful. Okay.
Oh,
A little more. Yeah.
Hey,
Now we
perfect.
can see you.
Yeah, just a little bit more. There you go.
oh. What happened
Perfect.
to you, Pat? There you are. Okay, good
That's
morning.
supposed to move to the bottom of the screen. Cindy, you're next.
Good morning. I have lived in Natick for 2.5 years. I'm a trail steward and a trash picker-upper intermittent at Coolidge Field.
All right.
And I'm still getting to know Natick, but I love living in the center because I can just walk everywhere.
Excellent. So yes, it's good we did the introductions because that gave a few more people a chance to join up with us. So the last person that I have right now is Rick. Now you got to unmute.
You're muted.
Thank you. Yeah, let's get to you, Evan. I'm looking forward to hearing you. Thank you. My name is Rick. Welcome.
Thank you. And I think that's everybody. If everybody could just mute, just so we could hear our speaker better. And I'll introduce Yvonne again. Coffee with a Purpose has become more global recently. We started off dealing with Natick issues, but a couple of times recently we've ventured into things going on outside of Natick, particularly in Africa. And I'm really interested to hear about what's going on in Zimbabwe. My memory is not very good, so I probably could be, if you could probably go back to how Rhodesia became Zimbabwe and start us off there and then get to what's going on now. I'll be very interested in that. Right over to you. And I'm going to mute anybody who's still unmuted. Okay, fine. It's all yours.
All right. Well, Martin, thank you very much. Forgive me if I saw your email come through over the weekend. My hands were full with my daughters, and they're still young daughters. So when their energy is up, I'm still trying to keep up with their energy. So I saw your email come through, and I was like, okay, I see it, and I'm sure it's got all the instructions, and it did. But thank you so much for having me come and speak with you and share with you. If I lose you here, what I'm going to do is I have my phone queued up. I'm going to switch straight to my phone so that we can just carry on, because I know that my laptop has difficulty picking up the Wi-Fi here, but my phone does much better. So I And again, thank you to my wonderful host, Carol, who's literally provided a home for me. Whenever I travel out, I can't wait to get back home. It's a wonderful, wonderful place to just call home and to rest and to be based at. So thank you so much, Carol. Her partner in crime is not here. Hippolyte, she was with him in England, and those two, when they get together, it's first of all, it's like comedy fest, I was happy that she got a chance to go over there and be with him. I'm from Zimbabwe, as Martin just said. And let me tell you a little bit of, I'm thinking maybe let me tell you a little bit of my story first of all, and then I will put the context of Zimbabwe within that story as I tell it. I'll tell it as quickly as I can so that there is probably time for some interaction, which is what I think you are probably wanting to also do, so that those of us that have a hard stop at 10 o'clock can catch the meat of what we will talk about, or at least a few of the things I will have to say. So I became a pastor for a small church many years ago. In fact, I started off as a youth pastor. And my passion for young people in Zimbabwe was birthed by the fact that in the mid 1990s in Zimbabwe, in fact, beginning of 1990 in Zimbabwe, all the way through to about 2000, Zimbabwe went through a horrible HIV and AIDS pandemic. It was probably, next to Uganda, one of the most ravaged nations by the disease. And we got to a point in the late 90s where the life expectancy in Zimbabwe was actually down to 35, believe it or not. And we were losing young people at an alarming rate. And it became a goal of mine to help as many young people as we could to survive the scourge of this disease. And so that's how I ended up becoming a full-time pastor in the church that I used to attend, because I really wanted to get to a place where we could help our young people. And I was glad I gave at least 15 years of my life to that, probably the most enriching 15 years of my life, because we saw many young people who had been orphaned through the pandemic come to a place where they could have hope again for their lives. They could dream again. They could, start thinking about what they can do with their own lives and how they could keep themselves safe, because this was the big idea now, is preserving your life, preserving a whole generation of young people. So we led a lot of discussions on reproductive health in the church, which in Zimbabwe was really taboo at the time to speak about in the church, and still is in many parts of Africa. And that was like my entry point into being concerned for my nation, Zimbabwe. But fast forward from 2000, when I became a pastor, to 2016, which is where my journey took a different twist. Same passion, same vision, same mission, helping our nation, helping our generation, but took a bit a different twist. I sat in my office, my small office in Harare, totally frustrated at my inability to look after my family. Zimbabwe had been through multiple economic crashes. And when I talk about an economic crash or a recession, I'm not talking about, what you guys have here, which I look at and I think I can live with this. I'm talking about apocalyptically the economy falling off the face of the earth and just a complete obliteration. In 2008, actually, to give you an idea, we ended up with our largest bill, our largest note in our currency was a $100 trillion note. So think about that, $100 trillion written across one. They had the audacity to print out $100 trillion on one note. And at the height of inflation in 2008, that $100 trillion note was not enough to buy a loaf of bread or to get a haircut. That's how bad it was. My parents at the time had retired. They had some money put away as savings. And I can give you an idea. If in Zimbabwe, the US dollar, carries a lot of weight. So my dad had about $100,000 in savings, which, in Zimbabwe was very enough for him to retire. He woke up one morning after the inflation had taken root, he woke up with literally 25 cents, a quarter, 25 cents of the value of the money he had after the government just took away the money he had and, just lost it to inflation, lost it to the government saying, hey, guess what? We lost everyone's money. We're sorry about it. So we're going to zero everyone's accounts and start from scratch. So in 2016, I'm sitting in my small office and this process is happening again. The economy is beginning to tank again after the whole nation has spent 8 years rebuilding, after retired people have spent 8 years going back to work to try and build up their lives again. And it's beginning to happen again in 2016. This time it's happening when I have kids. So I propped up my phone against my Bible. I was frustrated. I was upset. I was angry. I'll be honest. And I propped up my phone against my Bible in my small church office and recorded a 4-minute video. And I just ranted in that video. And I just spoke about how it was just completely unacceptable that our politicians would do the kinds of things they had done with us since independence of Zimbabwe in 1980, from the time that we got independence from British colonial rule when Zimbabwe was Rhodesia. And it became Zimbabwe. For almost 36 years in 2016, they had just looted the country, gutted the entire, services, service delivery, the social nets everything was just gone. And so here I am, I record this and I say it's unacceptable for us as people to accept this. And if Zimbabweans are genuinely interested in saving their nation, it doesn't matter what side of the political divide you are, this is a moment we must stand together and say to our politicians, particularly Robert Mugabe, who would become a dictator, enough is enough. We're not going to put up with this anymore. To put this in context, why this was crazy, first of all, you have to understand the kind of person that Robert Mugabe was. He was a ruthless dictator. In the early years of his premiership in 1980 to 1985, Robert Mugabe murdered about 25,000 people in the south of the country. It's actually a genocide that took place because he was afraid that they would rise up against him and run him out of power because they're from a different tribe. And so this is a ruthless person. And in 2006, Robert Mugabe was 93, I think he was. So he had been in power for 36 years. And he was 93 at this time. And so this little video went viral and thousands of people watched it and downloaded it, and people began to talk about this idea of ordinary people saying no, because ordinary people in Zimbabwe hadn't done that because of the fear. We'd been so afraid for years of Robert Mugabe. In fact, a year earlier to me making the video in March of 2015, a young journalist in Zimbabwe had done the same thing. And he had recorded a video where, in fact, he had stood in the town square with a big banner that said, "Failed Robert Mugabe must step down." And within a week, he was snatched in broad daylight from a barbershop where he was having a haircut. And up to today, he's never been seen or heard of from, again. So this is a ruthless dictator that we were dealing with. I hope that you can still see me because I can see my my signal is a bit weak. So, yeah. Carol, you can just quickly holler, shoot a flare up if I freeze up and if people can't see me no more. Don't burn the house down, however. So anyway, so I recorded this video and people began to talk about we need to do something. And in this video, I was holding the Zimbabwe national flag and I was saying, this flag does not represent just one group of people. It represents all of us. It's a promise to this entire country. And when we look to this country right now, what this flag is promising us and what the nation looks like are two different stories. This flag has essentially become a fraud. And it is up to you and us, to you and me as ordinary people, to bring back the pride of what this flag stands for, the pride of the promise that this nation has made for its people, that it's a free place to live, that it's a prosperous place for us to live, with opportunities where we can get education and health and all of those things. So this went viral, and it just began a citizens movement. I'm going to attempt, and I say attempt here, I'm going to attempt to share my screen, and hopefully you'll be able to see some of the pictures of the things that we did. I don't know if that is any visible to you at all.
Yep, we can see
okay.
it.
So that is a picture of the first video that I put up on Facebook. You can see there, it's immediately had about 175,000 views, literally in one day. But it said right there at the top, if I've crossed the line, then I believe it was long overdue. I'm not a politician, I'm not an activist, just a citizen, #ThisFlag. And that's how that started. And it grew so quickly and so fast, it was unbelievable. I was a pastor of a very small church at this time. I had left the church that I was pastoring as a youth pastor, and we had started looking after a smaller congregation. Our congregation was about maybe 60 people that we looked after. But here I am now, at the start of what looked like a citizens movement. This is a picture of Robert Mugabe, the dictator. He's late now. He passed away eventually in 2018. But I'll tell you the story of what happened before that happens. But the citizens movement grew, and we got to a point where I was able, unbelievably, I couldn't tell you how this happened, but unbelievably, I would be able to make videos, and I was able to literally call the entire nation to protest. It's illegal in Zimbabwe to protest on the street. You cannot do a protest unless you have the express permission of the government, which obviously is that doesn't make any sense. It's not a protest. A protest is supposed to be the right that a citizen has to hold their own government to account. It's what the Constitution provides for us. But in Zimbabwe, they trample that right. We are not allowed to exercise it, even though it's there in the Constitution. We have to get permission to do it. So we thought, how do we get people to protest? How do we get people to say enough is enough, to show the power that the people have to hold their elected officials to account? So I made a small video where I said, listen, if you really believe that we've had enough and this needs to stop, I'm going to ask you to join me in a protest, but it's going to be a reverse protest. I'm going to ask the entire nation, the whole nation, if what we're doing is genuine, if this makes any sense to anybody, I'm going to ask the entire nation to stay at home. We're going to shut the country down. Which was, whenever I think about it, I think how crazy it was for me to even suggest that. And the idea was to ask everyone to stay at home, to not take their kids to school, not open their businesses, not go to work, and not drive on the streets, not go to the shops, nothing. Just let's cause the entire country to become a ghost country for one day. And so I called for this shutdown Wednesday, the 6th of July, 2016. We asked everyone to stay at home, and just for the government to understand that we were tired of the corruption, the injustice, and the poverty. And unbelievably, on 6th July 2016, the entire country, Zimbabwe, at least 12 million people came to a complete standstill. It shocked me. It scared me more than I can't even explain how much it scared me. But I'm sitting there, and the whole nation is listening, and they're now asking me, okay, Ivan, so we've stayed away. What do you want us to do next? And at the same time, you have a government that's sitting there thinking, okay, so you're telling the country to shut down. We suspect that you are a terrorist. And this was one of the newspaper reports that came out the following day, and it says, Mawarire, this flag rattles Mugabe. And it was, I remember I was in hiding when this report came out once the shutdown had happened, because we knew the government would arrest us. And I was shocked that they were talking about me rattling the dictator. I mean, it was just unbelievable that this was happening. And so within a few days, I was hunted down. I was living in a safe house. My family was at home. And when they threatened to arrest my wife, who was pregnant at the time with our third, they 5-year-old, 3-year-old. They actually showed up at their school whilst I was in hiding and attempted to snatch them from the school. And if it weren't for the teachers who stood their ground, I don't know what would have happened to my kids. But I guess it was a way to try to get me to come out of hiding. So eventually I did come out of hiding. That's another newspaper clipping you can see there that says Mawarire is a terrorist. Of course, I came out of hiding eventually and was immediately arrested. I was thrown into the maximum security prison. Zimbabwe has what they call the notorious Chikurubi maximum security prison. And for one night I was in that prison. It's difficult for me to still very difficult for me to talk about what happened in that prison. But we spent the night, first of all, we went through quite a bit of interrogation and then was eventually tortured that evening for many hours until the next morning when I was to appear in court. And this is for me, despite that difficult situation, this is for me where a miracle then happens. As I'm being taken to court, people begin to gather at the courts. And at first there was a group of 100 people. They were with their flags there, and they were saying they were there to stand in solidarity with me. And the policemen who were taking me to court in the car said to me, "Hey, we're delaying going because a small crowd is gathering. There's about 100 people. We're going to disperse them with the riot police. We don't want anything happening there." So we delayed before we took off, but we delayed for about 2 hours, and eventually they came back and they said, "Listen, we're going to delay for a few more hours because the crowd is growing. There's about 500 people there now. We're not sure how to disperse them." And they came back multiple times over an 8-hour period before we eventually went to court. And by the time we left to go to court, there was about between 5,000 and 8,000 people that were gathered. It was just incredible. People were calling each other from work, coming to the courts, to stand with me. And that's one of the pictures there of people who are at the courts, who were standing in solidarity. They were praying, they were singing, and they were demanding my release. And eventually, by the end of the night, because this was really growing and people were coming out in their thousands, it became an issue of national security. So the government then decided to let me go that night. And I was released that night. This is people who had mounted an all-night vigil with their candles, and they had refused to leave the courts. And by the time I was let go, which is the next slide, this is when they had released me. You can see that's thousands of people and the media and so forth into the crowd. And from that crowd, I escaped immediately out of the country into South Africa for safety. But the picture before that, this is an amazing moment. When I went into that court, I went with one lawyer who was representing me. And the magistrate, because we have a British judicial style court system. We don't have juries. We just have a judge. The magistrate asked who was representing me, and they asked to see your credentials. And so she said, "Can I see the credentials of the attorney representing Mr. Mawarire?" And as he stood up to show him his credentials, all these people you see in this picture are all lawyers in Zimbabwe. They all stood up with their cards, and they all put them up, and they all said, "We're here to." It still chokes me up today, because it was such a powerful moment to see people come out and decide that they were going to stand up for a citizen who was being abused. And there must have been about 100 lawyers who stood up. So that was an amazing moment. But I escaped the country and had to be in South Africa. And then eventually I had to get my family out of Zimbabwe because they were being threatened to a place of safety. That's me again trying to leave the courts with people there. This is a very interesting picture, which is a kind of a knockoff of Captain America. Somebody designed, I don't know who did it, but this went viral. Someone designed that, and as you can see, it says Captain Zimbabwe there, and they kind of designed this. But this was part of the euphoria of what was happening in Zimbabwe, where people felt like there's this one individual who finally has stood up and whom we can all stand behind and demand a better country. Of course, then I was then classified a dangerous criminal. That's again a newspaper clipping you can see there, and again we escaped into safety. Whilst I was away in South Africa, I met a lot of Zimbabwean students who were studying in South Africa. That's part of what I did, was travel to different cities and places and gather Zimbabweans and talk about what we need to do back home. And this picture is one of those pictures where I met students at a university talking about what we needed to do for Zimbabwe. I did the same thing here in the US as well, eventually, leaving South Africa and coming to the US. But when we got to the US, this was in 2016, my family was here with me now, so they were safe. And my daughter was born soon after our arrival, which was a huge miracle, because we had traveled whilst, my wife, her name is Samantha, whilst she was very pregnant, and somehow they let us travel, I guess understanding the situation we were in. And within a couple of weeks, actually, of us arriving, she gave birth to our daughter, our third daughter, which was amazing. But I had this sense within me that we still had work to do in Zimbabwe, that we were not done. So 2 months after my daughter was born, I made the decision to go back to Zimbabwe. I always think about that decision, whether it was the best decision or the worst decision. But at that point, I had a belief that it takes the people of Zimbabwe to fight for Zimbabwe, to fight for their democracy. And running away from dictators emboldens them. It gives them a sense of fierceness, which they don't necessarily have. They want to appear bigger than they are. And so I asked my wife if I could go back. She wasn't happy about the decision, but I really wanted to go back to Zimbabwe. So I did. On the 1st of February, 2017, I made my way back to Zimbabwe after 6 months in exile in the US. And on arrival at the airport, I was immediately arrested before my passport could be stamped and taken away once again. And I ended up right back in Chikurubi maximum security prison. It's a very difficult time. I spent 2 months in that prison undergoing the same treatment I'd gone through in 2016 when I'd been arrested. And once again, got to a place of kind of being very disappointed with what Zimbabwe had become like. But I was excited at being able to have gone back and faced it. It meant my family was without me for many years, however, because that decision ensured that I was now stuck in prisons and in the court system for 3 years and was away from my family for that time. In 2017, that very year, at the end of the year, our movement was able to mobilize people to get to the street. This is one of the arrests. I think I was arrested another 4 or 5 times during that year. And something incredible happened during this period of the arrest. This is one of those moments whilst I'm in prison. You can see me with my Bible as we'd been locked up. But something amazing happened. We mobilized people over and over again. We spent the time whilst I was out in bail. I couldn't leave the country and come back to be with my family. But we continued to mobilize people up and talk about the injustices, talk about the freedoms we needed, talk about the basic services that we didn't have anymore, talking about the corruption that was happening in Zimbabwe. And by the end of 2017, we were now mobilizing to to demand the resignation of Robert Mugabe. It was a bold thing to do. It was a crazy thing to do. I have to be honest with you. And this is one of those moments after a court session that we were talking about this in front of journalists and so forth to try and get Robert Mugabe to resign. This is a glorious moment. At the end of 2017, I was able to win one of my cases. This was a treason case. So I was on trial. I had 4 cases of treason against me. Each of them carry a 20-year sentence if you're found guilty. So I was looking at 8 years in prison had I been found guilty. And this is one of those moments in which I was able to beat that case, which was amazing that we had been able to do it when you consider the fact that the courts system in Zimbabwe is completely captured. But I was thankful that we were able to beat the system, on that particular occasion. And one of the reasons we were able to beat the system is that a group of lawyers, is an organization here in the US called the Human Rights Foundation. They had submitted a case for me at the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention. And the United Nations had unbelievably, once again, passed a resolution, a note or a resolution that my detention and my arrests were illegal, they were unjust and unconstitutional, and they were calling on the government to release me. And that's part of what helped for me to be released on this particular day. So an amazing day. You can still see I'm still putting on my prison garb as I leave the prisons. That prison garb, by the way, is the filthiest clothes I've ever put on in my life. In the seam of that and the collar of that, actually, the first day I put those on, I was given to put those on. A group of prisoners who were Christian, when they heard that I was coming to their cell, they were so excited. And when I brought my clothes with me, they said to me, "Pastor, don't put those on yet because we have to help you clean them." And this is going to be a bit gross for you, but they showed me something I hadn't looked at because they don't wash these clothes as a part of the treatment for people that they want to suffer. They just leave them like that. But in the collar, in the seam, in the collar, and also in the sleeves of it, the prisoners opened that up and showed me. And in there, you could see lines of lice eggs in there. So the lice are left to breed in there, and then you put those on, and of course that becomes part of your punishment. So they took these kind of khakis that I had on, and they took a cigarette lighter, and they would burn the inside of the seam so they could burn the eggs off because they were just too many to crush. So they would burn them off all the way around. And they would give me back my clothes to put on. But again, a wonderful moment to be able to have victory, but not victory just for me, but that which I could share with my fellow citizens. On this particular day, this is now the end of 2017. I fast forward, there's a lot of missing information and detail in this, but we had mobilized people on this particular day to march to demand the removal of Robert Mugabe. And the whole nation heeded this call. It's the first time our nation had ever done anything like this. It was an incredible moment. You can see this is one of the pictures of the hundreds of thousands of people that showed up for the protest. And by the end of 2017, Robert Mugabe finally resigned. So it was a euphoric moment, unbelievable that Robert Mugabe actually stepped down. When he did, this man took over, whom was his deputy, and he took over with the military. And unfortunately, as he took over with the military, things got worse in Zimbabwe. And because they were part of the system, they began to loot again. They began to arrest people and beat people. And it was just horrible. We spent the whole of 2018 in running battles with the military on the streets. And this is the first time the military had been deployed on the streets in Zimbabwe in history. And of course, people were shot at. The election in Zimbabwe in 2018 had been a rigged election. And so they shot people, unarmed protesters who were literally protesting, asking for reforms, for political reforms, constitutional reforms. And we lost citizens that day, one of my low points in our citizen mobilization campaigns. But we protested again against Emerson Mnangagwa, and in January 16, 2019, whilst I was asleep in my home after our first mobilization with this new president, my home was surrounded by 18 armed riot police officers. Those are the ones you can see sitting in the back of this truck over here. And over here, that's me over there being taken from my home and being bundled into this pickup truck. So they surrounded my home 16 January, and I was arrested and charged with treason again. So this was now round 2 under a new president, and this is beginning to happen again. It was a horrible experience, one that I did not expect to happen because I was getting ready to join my family back in the US, and unfortunately I ended up in prison again. And so I eventually came out of prison at the end of the year in 2019. We went to court and they could not convict me. What they essentially chose to do, this is me coming out of prison, they then chose to release me and proceed by way of summons, which means that they would collect evidence, they would spend more time collecting evidence, and when they were ready, they would call me back to court. But that was a window in which I could escape because I got my passport back as we waited for them to finish investigations. But I was then able to get a visa and leave Zimbabwe. And after 3 years of absence, I was able to join my family here once again, in the US. And I want to end here, but end by then telling you part of what I've gotten involved in when I came to the US. I spent about the first maybe 1 year of my arrival just dealing with trauma and getting some help to get over the PTSD, and just so much that we had gone through, the torture and the disconnection from my family. Seeing my kids again was an incredible moment. My little daughter, who was 3.5 when I got back, when I left her, she was 2 months old. She didn't know who I was at all. And, getting to know her was just amazing. But her and I now, we're inseparable. She's amazing, along with her 2 sisters. It's just been amazing being back. Of course, one of those things that does happen, and this is really just for this forum only to know, because it's still something we're dealing with, but one of those things that does happen in a process like this, where you're away from your family for that long, is that your relationship with your significant other suffers. And that's part of what has happened. My absence for the time that I was away caused our marriage to unfortunately break down, and so we're kind of dealing with that and trying to find a way for that to be more meaningful, particularly for the children. But that aside, I have loaned myself to helping democracy globally and talking about the rise of authoritarianism globally, and loaned myself to the mission of sounding the alarm that authoritarianism globally is on the rise, and using my story and the story of other of other activists who have gone through what I've gone through, to talk to people who live in the free world about protecting their democracy, about valuing the kind of freedoms that you have, about protecting the dignity of people, about being more kind, being more human, about not being afraid to hold people in office to account, about talking to people in the United States and in Europe and in the free world, about understanding that what happened in Zimbabwe could happen here. I've heard people talk about it could never happen here, but sometimes I sit back and watch some of the things that happen in the United States, and it scares me that people don't realize what this could lead to. There are people like myself, and part of what I've done is I'm part of an organization called Renew Democracy Initiative. And it's led by a man called Garry Kasparov. Some of you may know Garry Kasparov. He's a former world chess champion, and he is a Putin critic of note. And many years ago wrote a book called Winter is Coming, talking about the time that Putin will begin to really unroll his agenda of destroying democracies and trying to destroy some of the strongest democracies, including the United States, which I believe he has tried to influence in a number of ways. And Gary and the team that at RDI have formed what is essentially a cross-partisan organization, people who are center, left and center right, people who understand that there is something much bigger that America has that's bigger than our partisanship, which is our democracy. That our nation, is built on this wonderful, wonderful idea of a democracy that we must protect. And so people like myself have joined this group. There's people like Senator Heidi Heitkamp. There's people like Alex Vindman, if you know him, on the board. There is people like Anne Applebaum. She's a journalist. Annie Duke is also part of it. Bill Crystal is also part of it on the board. So many notable Americans who have said, listen, we're going to have to come together and decide how we help our nation understand that we can't lose our democracy, that we must fight for our democracy. And my role within that is to talk about how envious we are of American democracy, because we look at what this nation offers its citizens. We look at how this nation has been a beacon of light for our nation, for our struggles. We've pointed to America to hold our dictators to account. And we've said, this is what a democracy looks like. This is what they do in their nation. It's not perfect. We understand that it's not perfect, but they have it, and they fight to protect it. They have certain institutions that should not be meddled with. And so that's been part of my job, and that continues to be part of my job. I'm also a fellow currently at the National Endowment for Democracy in Washington, D.C. And this is an American organization that helps to fight for democracy globally. I'm also a Yale World Fellow at Yale, where I participated in a fellowship there in 2020. And this is about young leaders globally who are selected to come together and help to highlight some of the pressing issues of the world, from democracy to saving the environment, to issues to do, with renewable energy, to issues to do with minority rights and so forth. And I've also recently just been accepted by Johns Hopkins University as one of their fellows, a dissident in residence, beginning in August of this year, where I will spend time every month with their students, just helping them understand what it's like to live under an authoritarian regime. I'm going to stop right here. I hope that I've left you with some value and told you something that is of interest to you. And I know that there are some of you who will have to leave in a few minutes, which is fine. Thank you for joining. And I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have or interact for the next couple of minutes before we close it down and let you guys carry on with your lives. So thank you once again. I value this opportunity so much. Thank you for your kindness and your generosity, particularly for allowing me to come and speak with you this morning and share my story. Thank you again. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Ivan. That was fascinating, and I'm sure people have a lot of questions. I see the first hand up is Brian, so I'll give it to you, Brian.
I'm just congratulating you. Nice work, nice presentation, and way to go. You've made a dent in the world. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian. I appreciate that. I think at the end of the day, you kind of, sometimes you see that there are things you choose to do in life, and then sometimes there are things that choose you to do them in life. And I guess this is one of those where I ended up in something I hadn't particularly signed up for. So thank you, Brian.
And Rick, your hand up.
Yeah, unmute. Thank you, Evan. It's a wonderful presentation. Africa is a huge place. I'm wondering how extensive your concerns are for democracy elsewhere in Africa, East and West, where, subcontinent anyway. So that's my question.
Well, Rick, that's a really good question. My concerns are very deep for the rest of Africa. We are in a place where continentally, democracy is under threat and is on the decline. And a big part of that is the influence of China, and now the influence of Russia on our continent. And that is aided by the fact that many African countries are poor countries. And so usually wherever the country can get a handout from is where the country is beholden to. And so because China itself is not a democracy and does not support democracy, when they bring quote unquote development or aid to African nations, part of what they do is also support these authoritarian regimes to stay in power, so that China has access to the resources that we have. And I'm talking about coal, I'm talking about chrome, I'm talking about granite, gold. I mean, there's all sorts of things. I'm even talking about the environmental degradation. One thing that may be known or unknown to you as a group of people is China's direct influence to environmental degradation in Africa. They do not pay attention to any form of environmentalism when resources are being mined. I'll tell you a tragic story of about 20 elephants in one of our national parks that were found dead by a watering hole in Zimbabwe because some Chinese nationals had paid very little money to locals to put cyanide in a watering hole so that these elephants could be killed and they could cut off the tusks for ivory. China is the biggest purchaser of ivory globally. So this is causing, a lot of the democratic processes to become eroded in Africa. Chinese diplomats are not afraid to offer bribes through the business people that come from China into Zimbabwe or into Nigeria or into Kenya or into Zambia. So unfortunately, that's one of those things happening. But I do want to put a silver lining in this dark cloud and say that the young people of the continent are beginning to understand this. And so they are really good, I don't want to call them uprisings, but they are good, strong, powerful citizen, young people-led movements that are starting to sprout up across the continent, that are putting pressure on these regimes, authoritarian regimes, demanding better governance, demanding democracy. And many of these young people themselves are starting to present themselves to run for office. These are young, educated young people who are there to replace the older generation, who many of them are people that came into power because they were at the forefront of the liberation struggles of Africa, but didn't really have the education or the knowledge of how to run a country. So this is part of the shift that's trying to happen and part of the struggle that's happening on the continent, at the moment. So there is that aspect of democracy declining, but there is this aspect of young people starting to become awake and wanting to fight for democracy and freedom in their nations.
Thank you.
Hey, Tom.
You mentioned this organization you're involved in. What was the name of the organization again?
It's an organization called Renew Democracy Initiative. I'm going to put attempt to put the link in the notes there so that you can kind of see what it's about and who is involved in it. But it was started, like I said, it was started by Gary Kasparov, and he has some amazing people that are part of it. In fact, one of the great big works that they've been doing lately is the Ukraine situation, and being able to mobilize funds and mobilize support for Ukraine. I think actually Renew Democracy Initiative runs the largest, one of the largest private, or should I say, non-profit mobilizations, for Ukraine. So I'm going to put that on the chat and for everyone to see, and you can have a look at the Renew Democracy site and see what they're all about, at some point.
Oh, there we got it. Okay, there it is. And we usually repeat the links that are in the chat when we send out the email. So if you miss it, you'll get it in the email. Carrie, you got a question?
I just want to say, Ivana, thank you so much for joining us today. I've had a privilege to talk to you one-on-one a couple of times and hear some of your story, but even today, I was just blown away. That picture of you with the different attorneys who showed up, at the court that day, I just brought tears to my eyes. Just think that all these people came out to support you in what you did. And it's just, you're a freedom fighter. It's amazing. And you're full well what's going on in this country in terms of what's trying to happen. How involved is RDI in terms of action right here in this country now, or is it mostly in foreign countries at this point? Did you catch that?
Carrie, I think I completely lost you there on the last one when you.
Yeah, I just want to see, in terms of
this RDI
doing, is RDI kind of.
It looks like his connection got totally lost. Hopefully he'll try to connect through his cell phone. Oh, you're back. Okay. Why don't you repeat it and see?
Let's try again. Yeah, I just was curious to see what, how active RDI is in this country and really just kind of educating the populace in terms of what a certain group of people are trying to do here in America and what efforts are taking place now with RDI.
Well, RDI, I think one of the.
Oh dear. Okay. Oh, we lost him again. He was trying to connect through his cell phone as well, but we did pretty well up to now. The connection has been good for the first hour, but let's see if we get him back. There we go.
I don't know if you can see me. I've come back on my phone.
Yeah, unfortunately, now you got two connections and I got an echo, so one of them's
I'm
gonna
going to leave on my
my
laptop here. Is that better?
Now we got it. Yeah.
Okay. I suspected this would happen, so I'm glad we were ready for it. So Carrie, if I try to reconstruct your question, you're asking about what is RDI doing within America to help American democracy? Am I right?
Correct. So Michael Steele is somebody else who did former Republican National Committee chair, I guess, is also part of RDI. He's been an outspoken critic of Trump and others. So maybe I'm just curious to see what RDI is doing here to sort of bring awareness.
Right. So I think a big part of what RDI is trying to do is trying to bring a sense of sanity to the way American politics, or at least American democracy, is discussed. So for example, to try and get people to understand that, number one, it is not a perfect democracy. There are those that say it's completely perfect and completely flawless. It's not flawless. But then there are those that say that it is completely ruined and it's a mess and the whole thing must be overhauled. It's not completely ruined. There are some good things in there. Now there's some bad things in there. It has its own flaws, like any democracy. And the idea that RDI is trying to put across is that there is a way for us to build a healthy democracy where we have open conversations and open debates without trying to destroy each other. There's a place where we have our free speech, but there's also a place where we are honest in what we speak about. Now, our politicians and those that speak must be honest people when we speak. Can we return to the values of trust and honesty that this nation has always espoused? But a big part of what we're doing, and I want to speak from where I'm involved, is hosting what is called the Front Lines of Freedom. And the Front Lines of Freedom is a set of programs and content that speaks particularly to university students about this issue of the rise of authoritarianism. One of the things we're doing is we're putting together a syllabus where we want universities and us together with them to partner to teach this idea. It's almost a civics 101 kind of a class, this idea of
being a responsible citizen, this idea of being a citizen who just doesn't stand on the sidelines, but who speaks up, but who is also aware that they live in a diverse community where there are diverse views, and is not someone who is inconsiderate of the existence of other views and other people that they live with. And so there's a big part of that is to then bring people like myself into these courses. I can tell you there's people like myself. There's a lady called Masi Alinejad, who is from Iran, an amazing activist from Iran. There's Leopoldo Lopez from Venezuela, an amazing, he'd been jailed. He now lives in another country because he was in prison for 4 years for speaking truth to power. Masi Alinejad from Iran, believe it or not, the Iranian government attempted to abduct Masi from New York, from her New York apartment, and take her back to Iran. And she was, speaking up against this whole situation of women's rights, women being abused in Iran and being forced to do certain things and being denied rights to do certain things. And so they decided that they were going to kill her. And taking these voices and being part of these courses that the professors in universities are building, and we come in to give the practical aspects, to say, hey, what you are reading as theory, here's the practical side of it. So for example, I spoke at the Johns Hopkins University course. I spoke at a UPenn University course. I'll be speaking at the University of Virginia course. Just one class or two classes to tell my story, tell what we did, tell what we saw, but also tell about the state of our democracy. And again, say to young Americans, don't allow this to happen on your watch. Don't trade this in because you're trying to defend just a party position. Defend a party position that speaks to the beauty of this nation, that speaks to building this nation to be far better than the state that you found it in, whether you were red or whether you were blue or any other color in between. So that's part of what we're doing together. I'm actually hosting a podcast, by the way, which my first session of the podcast actually went up this last Friday. It's a podcast called Frontlines of Freedom. And I interview all these different activists and these different freedom fighters from across the world. And part of what we do is we bring back this message and this idea of how valuable is American democracy to Americans and how valuable is American democracy to the world. Because it is valuable to the world, for many people who don't know. Sometimes part of what we do is to let them know that what you preserve here means a lot to people who live under extreme oppression. So there's that. So there's a few other things that are happening, but I think that's at the core of what we're doing, is attempting to speak to American audiences with this sense of protecting genuine democracy, in the US.
I just want to give a quick shout out to Carol for between yourself and Hippolyte, opening up her house to, just welcome, the two of you there at different times. It was just two amazing people who have quite stories to tell. I know the two of you met at Yale. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you sort of came to know each other?
So every year, Yale University selects 16 individuals from around the world whom they believe are doing things that are impacting their community and doing things that are impacting the world in terms of ideas that could be replicated globally. And in 2020, I happened to be chosen amongst those 16, and so was Hippolyte as well. He was chosen for the work that he is doing, which is stopping the transgenerational transfer of hate. Hippolyte, of course, you guys would know that he is a genocide survivor, an amazing young man. So he was doing his work on, stopping this transfer of hate intergenerationally because of genocide. And my work was more to do with democracy activists. So we were part of this fellowship together in 2020. And we spent some time together on the campus just as the world was starting to open up from the pandemic. And so Hippolyte and I met, we connected, and it was strange because I was coming up here from Connecticut to see my family for one weekend, and Hippolyte was coming out here to see Carol and to spend some time with Carol. And I needed a place to stay. And so Hippolyte said, hey, I'm going to ask Carol if you can spend the night here. And, the night turned into about 6 months of staying at Carol's place now, since I finished. So I finished at Yale, and then I lived in Pennsylvania for the year. And then at the beginning, in December of 2020, December 2021, excuse me, I then made the move up to Massachusetts, and number 9 Crescent in Natick was my landing pad. And this is I drove my Mayflower here to Natick as well. Yeah.
So yeah, thank you so much. We're going to be probably closing out pretty soon. We're losing some people already. It's after 10 o'clock. I know Paula has had her hand up, but those who are able to stick around afterwards, I think I mentioned the email. We don't have any speakers lined up for the next few weeks, so we're going to have a little informal discussion after our program for those who want to stick around. And Paula, you're the last one with your hand up, and then maybe some closing comments, and we'll be all set.
Thanks. Evan, I came in, I missed, a good chunk of your presentation, and I apologize because it just is so interesting, but it's very much a political story that you're telling, but I know that you're a minister, and I wonder how you would tell the story from a spiritual perspective. For example, like, I come anchored in A Course in Miracles, so I know everything is about love versus fear, forgiveness versus guilt, as above, so below, nothing comes unbidden to us. And when I came in at the point where there was a vigil during your imprisonment that grew to the thousands. And, the story that I'm telling myself was that there was a collective healing that brought those people out to you. Would you agree? And can you just tell me, like, how do you interpret this through the lens of your spirituality?
Paula, I am literally having goosebumps as you mentioned this, because it's very much the constant theme in this story is the things that I cannot explain that happened, the moments that I have no scientific or academic way of explaining to the academic audiences I have to speak to about this story. And it's often the story that goes untold because there's no context for it within the political world or within the academic world of political scientists who study this. But in a nutshell, let me give you some very interesting moments. The first one is exactly the moment you have said. We are still trying to figure out how people mobilize themselves. It was probably one person who decided with their flag that they would go there. But it was so viral, this idea of grabbing your flag and going to the courts, that people were leaving their jobs in the middle of the day and saying to their bosses, if you fire me, that's fine, but I'm gone because I need this moment. It's not just for Ivan. This is a moment for me and my children. It's a moment for me to, for the first time in my life, scream out loud without fear that I have had enough and I want something better. And that blew me away. I remember this moment, Paula. I sat in the prison cell waiting for the court session to start, and it wouldn't start because the police didn't know how to disperse the growing crowd. And as I sat in that prison cell, I could hear from a distance people singing. And at first I thought it was in my mind, but they were singing about Zimbabwe. And it's a song that says, and Zimbabwe must be saved, and Zimbabwe must be saved. And it kind of carries on with that refrain in a couple of words. And I sat there and I was in tears as I listened to this song, because I suddenly realized that this moment wasn't about me. It was happening to me, but it wasn't about me. It was about thousands of people, it was about millions of people who had found a moment, who had found an opportunity to say something, to speak up, to just let the pressure out, you know. And when you speak about a collective and national healing, that's exactly what that was. A chance to stand together publicly and just say, we need better. We've had enough. Please, can we do something better? But there was a moment when I was taken to prison on my second arrest. That is one of the most beautiful moments. And as I entered the prison, I was put into the D section. They have 4 sections. They have an A section, B, C, and D. The A section is for those serving 2 years and below. The B section for those serving 3 years and above, 3 years to about 4 years, and then the C, and it carries on like that. The D section is for those serving 8 years to life. I hadn't been convicted yet, and they threw me into the D section. I didn't know what to expect, but this where I was going is where the roughest of the roughest prisons of the entire nation were kept, and this is where I was being thrown in. And so I got into this section not knowing how I would defend myself if I got attacked. The first 4 people, I'll never forget this for as long as I live. The first 4 people who approached me, these 4 men came, and I thought they were going to beat me up and rape me. I mean, it's because those things had happened. And so these 4 men come up, and the first one, his name is Charles. I'll never forget Charles. He puts his hand out and he says, "Pastor, welcome. My name is Charles. I'm serving a life sentence for murder. I accidentally murdered someone in a bar whilst defending my brother. And these 3 gentlemen who are with me, we heard about you last year, and we've been praying for you that God would preserve your life. But when you were arrested, we knew that you weren't going home. They were going to send you to prison. So we prayed that you would be brought to this particular cell so that we could look after you." And this guy, and he said to me, "You know what? I have a family and I can't do anything for them, but you are my only hope for my family. So I'm going to play my part. I'm going to play my part to look after you whilst you are here, because when you go out, you're going to play your part to look after my family." I'm crying, but I'm laughing because it was such an incredible moment. I mean, I stood there and I thought, what are the odds? What are the odds for the 4 months I was in prison? Those 4 guys did everything for me. They supported me. They protected me. They told me how prison works. They made sure I wasn't hurt or abused by the other prisoners. Only when I was abused by the prison officers is only the time they couldn't do anything about it. But they circulated a message amongst the prisoners, and they said, "Hey, this guy who is here is one of our guys. Don't touch him." I mean, they gave me because when you sleep in the prison, there are no beds in Zimbabwean prisons. You sleep on the concrete floor, and you get 2 blankets. One blanket you get a chance to fold into being a pillow, and the other blanket you decide whether you cover yourself or whether you lie on that. They got me a 3rd blanket. One of them gave up their blanket. They asked each other in the cell that I was in. It's a small cell that doesn't measure very large. It measures about maybe 8 meters by 8 meters. I'm not sure what that is in feet, but that cell had about 40 men in it. So we were jam-packed in this cell, and they would smoke. And these 4 guys advocated. They spoke to their friends. They gave up their food. They traded their food for favors to say, "Guys, could you make sure that for as long as this guy is in here, because he doesn't smoke, could we make sure that we don't smoke? Because we need him to be in good health when he leaves." I still cannot believe it up until today that happened, So there were many moments that took place that when I look back upon them, sometimes I'm not surprised that I remained alive in a journey that many people died, because I can just see these amazing moments that I can't explain them. Of course, as a pastor, I'm saying, yeah, I feel like God was at work in my life somehow. There were just moments orchestrated to lead me to safety, like the prison officer who came and told me not to eat food in one of the cells that night and said, listen to me, you don't know who I am and you don't need to know who I am, but tonight when the food comes, touch none of it. The plate that's going to be given to you, throw it in the toilet, don't eat any of that food. I don't know what he meant. I don't know whether it was poison. Up to today, I don't know. But I didn't eat that night because of that man's instruction. So there's so many of these moments. And it's literally impossible for me to separate the miraculous of this journey and how that contributed to the many, many moments. I've shared with you just a sliver of some of the things that took place that I cannot account for. And that sometimes I end up not mentioning in academic circles because it just sounds crazy that some of those things would take place. But yeah, I'm sorry that you suddenly reminded me of some things here that that I haven't thought about in a while. But thank you for asking that question.
Well, it was incredible hearing that moving story.
Yeah.
We're really going to be signing off soon, but we have one more question, and I think maybe two. Okay, we'll try to make it quick. You have time for a couple more?
Evan, I am still just finishing this book, Jesus and Nonviolence, and I was reading it. You probably are familiar with it. If you're not, I think you would enjoy reading it.
I would love
other
that.
People would. And I've been reading it. It turns the scripture in Matthew upside down from what most people, I think, have grown up understanding about turning the other cheek, walking the extra mile, give your undergarments with your cloak. And he says, when you're doing a nonviolent movement, you need to find ways where you can have power, but without harming the other person. And when you talked about having everybody stay home instead of going out, I thought, oh, that is exactly what this guy's talking about, and how brilliant. And that was just because I'm reading this book right now, it really resonated with me. So I just wanted to share that. And I can put it in the chat if people are. It's 100 pages.
Why don't you put it in the chat, the citation?
Yeah.
Please put it in the chat. I'd like a copy of that.
Yeah. It came out in 2010.
It's called Jesus and Nonviolence.
Yes, by Walter Wink.
Okay, I got it.
Okay, and Ricky, somehow it just seems appropriate. You're the last one to speak. I was thinking about you the whole time, so go ahead.
Well, I have to say, this is the most riveting story that I have heard firsthand from anyone. And I'm someone who sort of looks at the world as a place of chaos and a place of destiny, two sides of the same coin. And I'm amazed at your story, the way in which one thing has led to another, and that you have survived all of these episodes of mass, how do I put it? That there is a societal consciousness that somehow you've tuned into, and they have heard you. Call from Evickman. 1 minute, please. I'm still on my Zoom thing. I'll see you when I see you. Okay, I will. I'll call you. Yeah. Sorry about that.
It's okay, Erica.
But I, you know, that you are able to be so passionate about your country And yet you're able to step back and see it in a larger context. That's something that is very difficult for anybody to do. But that you have done that and you are willing to invest time and energy and passion and love into helping this country see its danger and it's real and it is a danger. I would like to send you my Zoom call that I did in March, in which I used the occasion of my story as a way to try and help people these days to be awake to what danger we are in. If you have an email that you can send to me, I will send you my Zoom call.
Absolutely.
Because I feel we're on the same road, that the same kind of fear that I feel for this country, you are aware of it. And I am desperate as to how to figure out to make it something real to the people who live here, who have been given this wonderful gift and who are totally oblivious to how precious it is and how easy it is to lose it. And somehow I don't know how to get through to people so that they will drop their everyday lives and pay attention to what they need to do to preserve our democracy. I would love to be in touch with you further beyond this meeting.
Absolutely.
And I would like to send you that Zoom so that you can, I really feel this connection, and it's phenomenal.
Oh, wow. Well,
Uh,
Erica, thank you so much, Erica, for those words. And, the moment I found out you were a Holocaust survivor, I did have such a sense of respect, because I was then drawn to studying that more as I went through what I was going through. And I studied the stories of some of the survivors, which is what actually got me through some of the things that I was dealing with sometime last year when I was receiving some therapy. I certainly would love to be connected with you. I'm going to ask Martin, if you can, either Martin or Carrie, if you can give Erica my email address, and you and I can be in touch from here on and see what we can make of our combined efforts to sound the alarm bell.
Yep. It's a great one that Ricky did. It's you'll get a lot of it.
I sort of feel like the thread is part of that thread of miracles, that I somehow got a chance to hear you in person, and you bring tears to my eyes, and you bring, the passion is always there, but you do something special. You're a wonderfully inspired human being.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Erica. Thank you, and bless you, bless you, bless you.
And
Thank
bless you as well. Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem.
Thank you.
Oh, so yeah, thank you, Ricky, for that. I couldn't be a better closing, and I thank you so much. And Yvonne, thank you so much for being here. We all appreciate it. I think we all found it inspirational. We're so lucky. I kept thinking of that, to have people like you and Natick that are here that can tell these stories. So, thank you.
Thank you again. Thank you. I really appreciate all of you. Thank you to my good friend Carol. I would never have met you had she, not opened up not just her home but her heart to people like myself. And sometimes, tired souls like myself are just needing a place to perch for a season. And there's a few people that give us the privilege to live in their homes before the next season beckons. So Carol, I tell people about Carol wherever I go. And they marvel that this amazing woman takes in these dangerous criminals to live in her home. Thank you, Carol. I love you so much. Thank you.
There are many of us who would be honored.
Thank you again. I will let me do this. Let you guys carry on. I have a meeting I'm gonna go into now, but thank you from the bottom of my heart. You're a special group of people. Thank you so much. Thank you.